Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to All Things Policy. I'm Professor Nithiyanandam, and today's episode explores one of the most exciting transformations taking place in India's technology and policy landscape, the rapid evolution of the country's geospatial ecosystem. It's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Srikant Sastri, Chairman of the Geospatial Data Promotion and Development Committee, that's called GDPDC. Mr. Sastri is widely recognized as one of India's leading technology entrepreneur, investor, and ecosystem builder. He works at the intersection of policy, government, industry, startup, academia, and technology. Under his leadership, GDPDC, together with his involvement in initiatives such as Operation Dronagiri, enables him to reflect not only on where India's geospatial sector stands today, but also on what will be required to build a globally competitive, collaborative, and inclusive ecosystem for the future. Mr. Sastri, it's a pleasure to have you with us on All Things Policy.
Thank you, Professor Nitya. It's a pleasure to be on this podcast with you.
Thank you. Let's straight away jump into the question. Over the last few years, India's geospatial sector has witnessed tremendous momentum. From where you sit today, how would you describe this journey? Have we reached an inflection point on this?
Yeah, it's as you said, it's a journey and not a destination. The National Geospatial Policy was announced in 2022, and it's been 4 years. By some measure, 4 years is a lot of time, but when it comes to opening up a regulated sector, 4 years is a very short period of time. I think it's taken industry, it's taken the private sector and startups a while to understand how much freedom this deregulation offers them. But I think while I won't say we've reached an inflection point yet, but two indicators are significant for me. One is that there is a global ranking of geospatial knowledge infrastructure, GKI ranking. In 2022, India was ranked 27, and in 2025, the ranking had gone up to 15. So clearly, the world is taking note of the changes happening in India. That's one indicator. The second, which is more personal and goes beyond reports and rankings, is that every time I meet a startup or a larger company in the geospatial sector, the common theme I hear from all of them is we feel free, we feel as though our chains have been removed, and we really feel that the world has opened up for us. That feeling, to me, is the basis for any inflection point that will come upon us. That feeling is the basis on which massive growth in this industry will happen, Professor Nitya.
Fantastic. This is an interesting perspective because every major technological transformation tend to have a defining moment. In many ways, this looks like India has created one such moment. So the National Geospatial Policy has given the country a clear long-term direction. Looking back, what developments have encouraged you the most and what gives you confidence about where India is headed?
Right. So one of the things that's happened with our policy, and before I talk about what gives me confidence or what is encouraging, I want to point out that from the time the policy was announced in 2022 till today, the world has changed dramatically in three significant ways. One is the sheer quantum of data. Over the last 5 years, it's grown exponentially. I don't think when the policy was created, anyone anticipated that explosion of data. Second is the onset of AI. That wasn't envisaged. In fact, if you read the policy, there's barely any mention of AI anywhere. And third, of course, the geopolitics. And while the focus of the policy was to make India a global player, I think now it would be fair to say that the focus is on building sovereign capabilities given the geopolitical situation. If having said that context, let me talk about the progress that's been made or what's encouraging. I would be honest enough to say that almost everything is work in progress rather than being completed. And I'll take a few examples. There are 14 fundamental themes that have been laid out in the policy, which will form the backbone of India's geospatial progress. And there are 14 thematic working groups working on this. These are across ministries, they include private sector players also. One of the areas, for example, which is getting a great deal of attention is standardization of data. One of the issues which is real is that there is a lot of data in India across government agencies, outside government agencies, but those data sets can't talk to each other because they're in different shapes, formats, and sizes.
Right.
So creating data standards so that there's interoperability is one area where a lot of work is happening. There's a lot of work in building a certain amount of foundational infrastructure. For example, a common geodatic reference framework. If different data creators don't use the same XYZ coordinates on which their data is mapped, there's no way one data set can talk to each other. So building a common geodatic reference framework is an important aspect. And finally, having a set of foundational maps, ortho-rectified imagery, and a set of data sets that everyone uses as the foundation to build their own data on. That's work that Survey of India is doing. So a lot of foundational work in the thematic working groups with the common geodatic reference framework and the foundational maps. All of this is work in progress. But this is important and encouraging because it's on this foundation that everything going forward will be built on, actually.
Interesting. Then how India coping up with developments in last few years, especially because of geopolitical developments and also developments in GeoAI, as you rightly said?
So I think there are 3 or 4 areas I would like to talk about. One is there's a big focus on indigenous technologies in all our conversations, whether it is the CORS network, continuously operating reference station that Survey of India operates. Can that be indigenized? Can we indigenize hardware like GNSS receivers? Can we have our own geospatial software platforms? So there's a lot of thought being given to indigenous technologies. Second is, in terms of tech sovereignty, GeoAI is an important aspect. While it is true that foreign companies, specifically in US and China, have taken the lead on building the large LLMs, but there is an opportunity for Indian companies to build Geo AI applications. And I'll just take 2 examples, which are my personal favorites. One is, it is true that most of the LLMs do not do a good job in picking up precise geographical coordinates. If you give a specific set of coordinates in Delhi or Bangalore, the LLM will give you a location which is 150 meters away. So it's not based on geography, it's based on text matching. That's the weakness for LLM. So this is an opportunity for Indian companies. The second one is in terms of elevation. Most of the LLMs, if you give them a map, it doesn't know whether the river is flowing up the hill or down the hill.
Correct.
And which is where digital elevation models become important. And that's an area of opportunity for Indian geospatial companies. So as I see it, there are opportunities in GeoAI. There is an opportunity in building indigenous software and hardware. The third area of opportunity lies in the fact that the sheer volume of data that India has across different sectors, and I'm not talking here about consumer data, which is important and separate conversation. I'm talking about just sector-specific data, whether you take agriculture, whether you take transportation. There is a whole lot of data sitting with various government agencies and private companies. Can we create a vertical AI stack which is spatially enabled? And that's an important one where we can build a lead. And if you notice, the policy ensures that fine data below a certain resolution is only available for Indian companies. Foreign companies can only use coarse data. So the question is, can Indian companies leverage this policy advantage to build something which is unique and distinctive? That's an area where, again, tech sovereignty can certainly come to play.
Thanks for rightly pointing out key things. As a chairman of Geospatial Data Promotion and Development Committee, you have had the opportunity to engage with government, industry, academia, and staff. What role do you see the committee is playing in shaping India's geospatial future?
So as the word GDPDC says, the C stands for committee. So as chairman of the committee, I chair a committee, and therefore, by the very nature of a committee, the role of a chairperson is to bring people together, to take them along, to get them to collaborate. And therefore, I'll take two examples where such collaboration can be facilitated by the chairman of this committee. One area is in breaking the data silos. As I mentioned a few minutes earlier, there is plenty of data in India, but the data is sitting within different ministries, different government agencies. The data can't talk to each other. They're never brought together. So one area that we try and facilitate is to break those data silos. And so if you go back to our Operation Dronagiri also, we brought together 1,027 data sets from 27 data providers and made it available through a single interface. So that's one example of collaboration and breaking silos. The other collaboration is to bring government agencies, private sector, startups, and district administration together to run on-the-ground programs where geospatial data can be used for actual development of the country, whether in agriculture or transportation or urban development or any other sector. So collaboration that brings people together, gets them to work together on projects that can deliver tangible outcomes, that to me is the second big role. The third role, of course, is to ensure that all the foundational work, the 14 thematic working groups, data standards, creating a common infrastructure, facilitating all that, nudging people, removing roadblocks. I would say broadly that's the third role.
Yeah.
But the policy, if you read the document, there's a more detailed description of the role that the committee is supposed to play. But to me, these are the three high-level tasks that any committee or any chairperson should play.
So, rightly pointed out, Operation Dronagiri plays a crucial role in the sector right now. And then, it created considerable enthusiasm within the geospatial community, honestly. So, what is the larger vision behind it? And what long-term impact do you hope it will create for India's innovation ecosystem?
So we had three broad objectives when we conceptualized Operation Dronagiri. First was, and there were three hypotheses that we were testing. The first was, can we break the data silos and make it widely available? That was the first hypothesis, which is why we brought together 1,072 data sets from 27 providers and made it available through a geospatial data sharing interface. So that was the first objective or hypothesis. The second was, can we get private sector and startups interested and excited about using the geospatial data to build applications and use cases? That was the second objective and also the second hypothesis we wanted to test. So, which is where 19 large companies came together. We also engaged startups. We had a startup challenge. 1,200 startups applied, 24 were selected and funded. And these corporates and startups came together to work together in the 5 districts that we'd identified. So getting private sector and startups excited was the second objective, second hypothesis. Third was that by doing all this, can we provide better services to the citizens of India in a digital economy? That was the third hypothesis, and which is where the specific use cases in agriculture or logistics were experimented with. That was the third area that we experimented in. And it was exciting to see that in varying degrees and varying measures, these hypotheses getting validated. Of the 5 districts that we went to, I would say Varanasi district, particularly in agriculture and logistics, was a big success. The other districts, varying degrees of success. So it was a learning journey. It was documented. It was recorded. And we now have a template which says if we want to scale this up from 5 districts to 100 districts or 500 districts, how can a replicable template be put in place where private sector, data providers, district administrations, startups can all come together and to create measurable impact? So I think we have a national template. It's now a question of making the right resources and budgets available for that scale up. So that would be the larger vision and long-term plan, Professor Nitya.
Yeah, I can, completely vouch for this because I'm also happy to say a part of this advisory group for Operation Dronagiri. I've witnessed the effort which is being put out and the coordination required, and respective stakeholders have invested time, energy, and money on this. We will now slightly move on to the geospatial discussion on tech aspects to how it can be a national level capability. For example, it is becoming an enabler for infrastructure, agriculture, logistics, urban planning, almost every sector. So, do you believe or are likely to witness greater transformation than the sectors that we are working today in next decade?
Right. So I think the policy lays this out. And I also firmly believe that technology cannot be an end in itself. It has to deliver outcomes for our economy, for our society. And in that context, before even rolling out Operation Dronagiri, we had looked at a set of sectors and built use cases for them or business cases for them. And I'll kind of talk about 4 or 5 of these sectors. Agriculture, there was a view that using geospatial data, you can increase the crop yield, you can increase the farmer income. How do you make this possible? By the use of precision agriculture, by ensuring efficient water and fertilizer utilization, just as 2 examples. Can you drive up yield by 10% or 15%? And that's an experiment that was validated in Varanasi district, where 26,000 farmers, we saw 15% improvement in wheat yield last year and a 25% improvement in farmer income. So that's one sectoral example. The second one I would take is logistics. As a country, there are varying figures that you see, but one set of figures that you will find is that logistics costs as a percentage of India GDP is between 7.8 to 8.9%. That's a range that you will encounter. Can you reduce this by a few decimal places or percentage points? That has a huge bearing on the GDP. And the answer is, again, the experiments we tried with one of the third-party logistics providers in our districts was that you can actually reduce the logistics costs by simply having better maps, better addressing, particularly for rural areas. So logistics costs, logistics efficiency is the second one. The third one, interesting one, is property tax. India, if you look at all the urban centers, property tax collections as a percentage of GDP is only 0.2%. If you take comparable Southeast Asian countries, Vietnam, Thailand, etc., even they are at least twice this amount. I'm not even looking at first world countries where it will be in 3 to 4% range. Can we increase our property tax collections slightly by use of geospatial data? The answer is yes. Highway infrastructure. Over the next 10 to 12 years, India is going to add 50,000 plus kilometers of highway, and you're spending about 14 crores per kilometer. And there are cost overruns that happen because roads are misaligned at the planning stage. And there's a lot of cost overrun. Can we reduce some of that cost overrun through use of geospatial data at the planning stage? Disaster management, likewise. Each of these use cases, you're talking about $1 billion or $2 billion of annual upside, actually, if not more. So to me, those are the outcomes that we should all aim for when we scale up our Operation Dronagiri experiments nationally.
Yeah. So, which means the ecosystem still have scope to strengthen. So, what more can we collectively do to strengthen this ecosystem and accelerate innovation and adoption?
Yeah. So I think I would simply encapsulate this in 2 points, actually, where we need strengthening. And one is breaking the silos and getting people to collaborate. I spoke about breaking silos, data silos, which are sitting with different government agencies or even private sector. Can you break the silos and make the data widely available? So that is one kind of collaboration. The second kind of collaboration is collaboration across different government agencies, missions, and private sector. And I'll take a simple problem statement. If you look at November last year, uh, 400 flights at Delhi airport got diverted or cancelled because of
Yes.
GPS spoofing. Now, if
Right.
India has to build its own Cat3 landing system to prevent such spoofing, no one company or ministry or agency can do it, or startup can do it. It requires collaboration across semiconductor sector, space sector, geospatial sector, cyber physical sector, all of which have government missions running, all of which have startups and private sector companies active in, or academic institutions active in. Is there a cross-disciplinary, cross-agency team that can work on solving such national level problems? Uh, and geospatial is at the heart of all of this. That's the other kind of collaboration and breaking silos. And one of the efforts in this direction, which is ingrained in the geospatial policy, is the creation of a national geospatial data registry. That, for me, is one place through which all stakeholders are brought together. So overall, I would say breaking silos, having more collaboration happening will go a long way in strengthening our geospatial ecosystem.
Right. This is interesting to see how this technology has proliferated and how we are working along with other disciplines within the country. So, slightly moving from this, how about the global opportunity? Because India has already become a global leader in digital public infrastructure or on space technologies. Can geospatial be India's next global success story? Where do you see our biggest opportunity on this?
Yeah. So I think before I talk about global, I would like to reiterate that
Okay.
there is a large domestic market in India, both within the government sector and outside the government sector, which is waiting to be tapped under the deregulated geospatial policy. In the past, most Indian geospatial companies have done business mainly with the government. They should not depend on that. They should nurture the private sector and create private sector demand. So I want to make that one point and now tell you what I think about global. One is clearly there's a big global services market. The large projects, whether it's about agriculture, uh, forecasting, climate forecasting, land record modernization. Every country needs it. And therefore, there's a large global services opportunity which is there. And Indian companies in the past could not build those capabilities because how would you build capabilities in a regulated environment? But now I think they can boldly go out and build a global services business. Second is products, both hardware and software. And I spoke a while ago about hardware products, whether it is continuously operating reference systems or GNSS receivers. There's a variety of products that you can build, software products, whether it is basic mapping platforms or whether it is Geo AI based applications. I think India has an opportunity to build products for the global market. I think what this requires is two or three things. One is the government needs to support it by incorporating a lot of this in our bilateral agreements, particularly with many of the countries where we're signing free trade bilateral trade agreements. The second is it needs strong VC and PE backing. Because if you're going to be expanding globally, you need deep pockets, and which is where VC and PE funding becomes important. But if that funding becomes available in addition to what the government might provide through its schemes, I think there's a big global market in hardware and software products also, actually.
True, true. Because the one important thing is the next generation. So as we see more and more students are, tended towards is technology than ever before. So what advice would you give someone who wants to contribute meaningfully to this sector over the next decade?
So there are a large number of UG and PG programs through which there are students who are getting trained and coming out. And my information says there are about 90 to 100 colleges that offer these programs in geoinformatics, geomatics, geospatial technologies.
Various names.
But I think the challenge is a lot of the focus in their curriculum has been on GIS, remote sensing, and cartography. And a lot of the newer areas don't get attention. So someone wants to make a career, a successful career, they need to ensure that the gap areas which are not covered in the curriculum, they find other ways to bridge that through bridge courses, etc. In GeoAI, in advanced data capture techniques, whether it is LiDAR or whether it is drone-based photogrammetry, or even capabilities in terms of working with large data sets on cloud platforms. A lot of the other challenges, most of the professionals who come in from these courses, they come in, the departments are typically housed in a geography department or an earth sciences department. And therefore, a lot of the students don't have coding skills or software engineering skills, and that's going to be important going forward. So these gap areas, the students who are emerging need to figure out bridge courses to get themselves trained on, because without this, you will be behind the curve and not be able to capitalize on the opportunities that are going to become available. And there is a clear need for people, both within the government and in the private sector. The big bottleneck is going to be there aren't enough trained people to work on this, actually.
I have a sub question to this, but then this was a scenario before the LLM era. Now we have LLM which can help us to code as well. So
Yeah.
will this be an advantage to those students who have not been traditionally learning the coding part, but they can leverage to an extent now? But of course, learning the programming will definitely add a very good advantage to them. But I think this era will help them to fill that gap as well.
You're right, because of the many gaps that I mentioned, coding was just one of them. There are the other gaps that LLMs are not going to be able to fill. But the coding gap, you're right, the students who are now emerging don't need to do as much hard work to learn coding. But I think they need to have a fair appreciation of what coding involves in order to be able to use an LLM well for their coding efforts.
Right. So I also agree with another point. A lot of institutions focus on foundational subjects on this. In fact, we offer an expert capsule course where we try to build capacity from Takshashila to people who do not have time to go through the regular streams.
Right.
Here we had a flexibility to introduce something like we talked about GeoAI, we talked about geodesy, we talked about little unconventional, worked on cloud computing. So I truly agree with you because that is the need of an hour where people need to focus. So we have come to an end of this discussion. So looking towards 2030, as we look towards 2030, what opportunities should India seize? And I have two sub questions to it. Are we moving towards a right trajectory for getting unified geospatial portal? And the other one is, are we moving in the right speed to achieve digital twin at the end of 2035?
Yeah. So the geospatial policy has laid out timelines and goals for 2025, 2030, and 2035. And these goals were written 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Right.
And therefore, those milestones are important. And that's a long set of milestones and goals that have been put down. But I would kind of simplify this by talking about four important areas that needs the focus, not just of the GDPDC members and the government, but also the entire geospatial community. One is standardization of data. I would just urge that as data standards come into place, everyone, who's creating data or doing projects should ensure that they're using the data standards, because otherwise what will happen is 5 years down the line, we'll end up with much bigger silos. So Survey of India will be ready with their geo portal. They'll be ready shortly with the geodetic reference framework. Can everyone work with the same foundational maps and same foundational data? I think that's one area. Second is, I would urge the community to focus on private sector demand creation. For far too long, there's been a dependence on government projects and bidding for tenders, and not enough effort has been made to educate the private sector on how geospatial data can be used. And that's a big market that has to be, it won't happen on its own magically. It needs to be nurtured. That's the second area. Third is, I would say, GeoAI. It's an opportunity for Indian companies to build GeoAI products and services and take it to the global market. That's an area that deserves attention. And finally, I would just talk about the fourth area, indigenous technologies, software, hardware, all of these together. I think we are getting the scale now to build indigenous technologies, and we should focus on that. Those would be the four things, actually. As far as digital twin by 2035 is concerned, at this point of time, I don't have a clear answer to what we should be aiming for. Clearly, there are a lot of companies trying to build digital twins for cities, for municipal corporations, or for specific applications. But in my mind, I've yet to form a coherent view for what we should aim for by 2035, because a lot of the building blocks are just coming into place.
Right. So, I mean, there's one more sub question based on this. Do you have any figure in mind, like how much this technology can contribute to the overall development of the country? Because when I just looked at the numbers, what India estimated and what, let's say, China has contributed, all the things that you've flagged has really helped China to increase that number. They are in multiple folds just because of focusing on hardware, software, and various other components that we still need to pay attention. So, what is the figure for India, sir? If we work on these things,
Yeah.
and from the present scale, how much fold we can increase?
So the challenge with putting a number, and I go back to the very first sentence that you used when you opened this conversation. You used the phrase, and I made a note, that geospatial works quietly in the background. That's the challenge for geospatial. Geospatial is everywhere, because today 90% of the data that gets generated has a set of location coordinates attached to it. So 90% of the data is geospatial. But the real challenge to measure the size of this industry is because sitting inside every place, actually. If you take an IT services company, some of them have a dedicated geospatial division where the revenues might be demarcated. In some other cases, companies might be taking up projects which are geospatial, but they're not measured separately. So measuring pure geospatial revenues on a standalone basis to me is the challenge, because it's more a horizontal than a vertical, actually. And which is where, and I've been having this debate with everyone who publishes industry reports, how do you measure the size of this industry when it's a horizontal rather than a vertical? How do you accurately measure? So globally, for example, there's a number which says it's a $720 billion industry. How much of that is India? How much should we be aiming for? It's hard to put a number, which is why I really go back to a separate set of goals to say, can we set two different goals? One is making an impact on different sectors of our economy, agriculture, logistics, transportation, etc. And can we build 10 global champions out of India, which are world conquering leaders? And if you do that, then the collective effort will lead to an industry which is big. And at that stage, you'll start measuring the size of the industry separately. Right now, there is no foolproof way of measuring the size of the industry, unfortunately.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today. I feel like I should continue this, but just it has been an insightful discussion on how policy, technology, innovation, and collaboration are coming together to shape India's geospatial future. Thank you once again, Mr. Shastri, for sharing your valuable insights and perspectives with us. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on All Things Policy. If you enjoyed this conversation, do share this episode with your colleagues and friends and follow us for more discussion on public policy, technology, geopolitics, geospatial, and strategic affairs. Until next time, this is Professor Nithiyanandam signing off. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.